first NBA 2K25 ratings update of the season. Today is November 7th, 2024. As always, I'm Pete Toll, aka PT Sports 84. Let's dive right into it. We have a pretty good amount of changes overall. We have position changes as well in the roster. We also have some coaching staff updates and just a quick side note for anybody that's going to ask, there are no retro updates, no eras updates, and no historic team updates. Just want to get that out of the way in case anybody's wondering. This is only for the current roster. So let's dive right into it. As always, we start with the Philadelphia 76ers. So diving right in, obviously, Kelly Oubre gets a position change to shooting guard. Caleb Martin is the first ratings update. He goes +1 to a 77 overall. Kyle Lowry +1 to a 77 overall. Yerson Yabusele +2 to a 76 overall. He's been playing really well as the backup center to Andre Drummond. I think his role changes now that Joel Embiid is debuting against the Knicks coming up. And then last but not least, we have Jared McCain +3 to a 73 overall. Jumping over to the Milwaukee Bucks, who have really been struggling, Damian Lillard actually goes +1 to a 90 overall. Brook Lopez drops -1 to a 79 overall. Gary Trent Jr. -1 to a 77. Taurean Prince, which is assistant coach Darvin Ham's favorite, goes +1 to a 76 overall. DeLon Wright goes -1 to a 74 overall. +1 for AJ Green +2 for AJ Green to a 74 overall. Pat Connaughton's really been struggling. He goes -1 to a 73 overall. And Marjan Beauchamp is on the trade block. He goes -1 to a 72 overall. Jumping over to the Chicago Bulls, Zach LaVine gets a +1 to an 84 overall. Nick Vucevic goes +2 to a 83 overall. Kobe White gets a +1 to an 82 overall. +1 also for Josh Giddey, or +2 for Josh Giddey, excuse me. And then Lonzo Ball gets a +1 to an 80 overall. Ayu Dosunmu, where is Ayu? Ayu Dosunmu gets a -1 to a 77 overall. Julian Phillips gets a +1 to a 71 overall. Also position change to power forward. I'm not going to name all the position changes because it'll take longer for the video, but you can look through and kind of compare the rosters. I'll just name, if there's anything that's significant, I'll, highlight it. +1 over to the Cleveland Cavaliers, +1 for Donovan Mitchell to a 93 overall. Evan Mobley gets a +1 to an 87 overall. +2 for Jared Allen to a 87 overall. I actually have to fix my sheet. I had him as an 86 +2. So let me change that really quickly. You can look at the written changes over on Operation Sports. I posted the written notes as I always do there in the forum. Looking at Darius Garland. Darius Garland gets a +4 bump to an 86 overall. He's really played well under Kenny Atkinson. Karis LeVert gets a position change to small forward. He also goes +2 to a 79 overall. Sam Merrill goes +1 to a 75 overall. +3 for Ty Jerome as he goes to a 75 overall as well. And then we have, where is Dean Wade gets a position change to small forward. He goes +3 to a 75 overall as well. Over to the Boston Celtics. They've been rolling. Now with the injury to Jaylen Brown, I don't know. We'll see how it looks moving forward. He's already been hurt. But, it makes a difference overall not having him on the floor. And then you also are missing Kristaps Porzingis. But let's look at the changes overall. So we have Jaylen Brown +1 to a 93. We have Derek White +1 to an 87. Peyton Pritchard gets a bump. He goes +2 to an 80. Nehemias Keita gets a bump +3 to a 74 overall. And then Xavier Tillman gets a drop -1 to a 74 overall. Going to the Clippers, man, it's a really big bump for Norman Powell. He gets a considerable jump +5 to an 84 overall. Ivica Zubac gets a +2 to an 84 overall. So they're right there as the leaders with James Harden. Derrick Jones Jr. gets a +1 to a 78 overall. Chris Dunn +1 to a 76 overall. Position change for him to point guard. Terrence Mann gets a drop -1 to a 75. Kevin Porter Jr. gets a position change to shooting guard, and he drops -2 to a 74. He's been struggling really badly. Nick Batum -1 to a 74 overall. +1 for Amir Coffey to a 74. And then down at the bottom, Kai Jones gets a small bump +1 to a 70 overall. Looks like it's a steal for him on a two-way contract. Going over to the Memphis Grizzlies, we'll see what happens with Ja Morant. He went out with the hamstring injury last night. But some changes here. Desmond Bane gets a position change to small forward, and then Marcus Smart gets a position change to shooting guard. Also goes -1 in rating. Santi Aldama gets a +1 to a 77 overall. He's been playing small forward for the injured Bane. I'm not sure why the position changes were taken off on some of these players, but that's okay. Brandon Clark goes -1 to a 76 overall. Then we have Zach Edey. Man, he's been doing really well. No badge update for him, but he does get a +3 in overall. I don't really expect badges to get updated for many players, as they, in the history of 2K, they haven't. So, I don't think anything's going to change now. We get a +2 for Scottie Pippen Jr. to a 76 overall. Interesting enough, two of the really breakout players that no one expected, per se, for the Grizzlies, +7 for Jalen Wells. That is incredible, to a 75 overall. And then also as huge for the Grizzlies, Jay Huff has been really, really playing well. He also goes +7 to a 74 overall. Man, it's been good to see some of these guys kind of break out and do well. +1 to round it out for the Grizzlies to a 73 overall for John Konchar. He's now hurt, I believe, probably for a couple games. Going over to the Atlanta Hawks. So we have a jump for Jalen Johnson, +4 for Jalen Johnson to an 84 overall. Onyeka Okongwu goes +1 to an 81 overall. DeAndre Hunter +1 to an 80. And then Dyson Daniels, who's really, really been doing well, +5 to a 79 overall. Zachary Richichet, +2 to a 77 overall. Had a breakout game last night. Going over to Garrison Matthews, gets a position change. DeAndre Hunter also got his position changed to a small forward. Garrison Matthews to shooting guard. He goes +2 to a 74 overall. +1 for David Roddy to a 74 overall. And then glad to see Keaton Wallace get a little bump. He gets a +4 to a 71 overall. He's been playing well. He may actually outplay that two-way contract, I think, eventually, because Kobe Buffkin he can't stay healthy. So we'll see what happens there. But Miami Heat, -2 for Jimmy Butler to a 87. Bam Adebayo, -1 to an 87. Tyler Hero, +2 to an 85. Jaime Jaquez, -1 to a 78. Also dropping is Duncan Robinson, -1 to a 76. Nikola Jovic, -1 to a 75. Have no clue what's going on with Kevin Love. I wonder if the personal reasons he's going to end up retiring. Would not shock me, honestly. +1 for Haywood Highsmith. And then Pell Larson's the biggest jump for them, +4 to a 72 overall. Charlotte Hornets, LaMelo Ball, +1 to an 88 overall. If he keeps this up, he'll be an all-star this year. We have position change to shooting guard for Brandon Miller. Miles Bridges, -1 to an 80 overall. Trey Mann, +3 to a 79 overall. Nick Richards, he's hurt right now, but he did get a bump, +1 to a 78. Cody Martin, +1 to a 76. Position change as well to small forward for him. Seth Curry gets a +2 bump to a 75. And then rounding it out is Vasily Micic, who's really been bad this year, -2 to a 73 overall. Going over to the Utah Jazz, we have John Collins is having a really good season coming off the bench, +2 to an 82 overall. Walker Kessler, +2 to an 81. Keontae George, +1 to a 79. Colin Sexton dips to a 79 -1. Jordan Clarkson dips as well, -1 to a 77. And then down here, Kyle Filipowski gets a small bump to a 71 overall. He's starting at power forward because Markkanen had been hurt, so that's why he gets the bump and is actually playing decent. Going over to the Sacramento Kings, +1 for Domantas Sabonis, +1 for DeMar DeRozan to an 88 overall. Kevin Huerter gets a bump, +1 to a 76. I don't see a -1 for Keon Ellis. I would have liked to see them been on par with each other or get Huerter to a 77, but it's okay. Trey Lyles, -1 to a 74 overall. New York Knicks, we got position changes. So they changed the positions for Anunoby, Bridges, and Hart, along with McBride. So you'll see those there. Of course, Karl-Anthony Towns also got a position change, and he goes +1 to an 89 overall. Miles McBride, who I mentioned just a minute ago, got a position change to shooting guard, goes +2 to a 78 overall. And we also get Boo Buie added in as a two-way contract. They obviously converted Ariel Hukporti to a standard contract, along with adding Matt Ryan off the bench as another shooter. Los Angeles Lakers, we get a +2 for Anthony Davis to a 96 overall. D'Angelo Russell actually got pulled from last night's game by JJ Redick. He actually goes -1 to an 80 overall. Dalton Knecht gets a +2 bump to a 73 overall. And then -1 for Gabe Vincent to a 73 overall. Redick likes Vincent and wants to see what he has. I'm not sure about that one. I'm surprised Rui Hachimura didn't get a little bump, personally, along with Austin Reeves, but, that's just my personal view. Going over to the Magic, it's a shame Paolo Banchero is now hurt. He goes +1 to a 90 overall. Jalen Suggs gets a bump, +1 to an 83 overall. Wendell Carter Jr. looks like he's going to be hurt with the plantar fasciitis, -1 to a 79 overall. They don't have an injury designation for him, though. Mo Wagner has been playing really well this year, +1 to a 78. Jonathan Isaac -1 to a 77. Anthony Black, split time between point guard and small forward. He is actually going up to a +176 overall. Cole Anthony has been awful this year, -2 to a 76 overall. Anthony, I think, should be below Anthony Black, but that's just me. Tristan Da Silva and Jet Howard both go up 70 to 73 overall. Both deserving. They've played well since being in the rotation. Going to the Dallas Mavericks, we get nothing for Kyrie Irving. I thought he deserved a +1, but that's just me. We do get a -1 for PJ Washington, who struggled on offense. Has looked great defensively, just not offensively. Najee Marshall gets a well-deserved +1 to a 76 overall. I'd like to see that go even higher next time. But that's the Mavericks, pretty light for them. Going over to the Brooklyn Nets, we get Cam Thomas, +3 to an 84 overall. Dennis Schroeder, one of the biggest movers, +5 to an 83 overall. We get Cam Johnson, position change to small forward, also goes +1 to an 80 overall. Dorian Finney-Smith gets a +1 bump to a 77 overall. Zaire Williams has played well this year, +2 bump to a 75. Jalen Wilson gets a position change to power forward and gets a +3 bump to a 74 overall. Going to the Denver Nuggets. Man, they've been really hit hard. Murray in and out of the lineup. Gordon's going to be out a while. It's all on Nikola Jokic. But we do get Murray with a -2 to an 85 overall. Aaron Gordon +1 to an 85 overall. Christian Brown goes +4 to an 80 overall. We get Russell Westbrook +2 to a 79 overall. He's been playing well as a point guard when he started in place of Murray. Coming off the bench, not so much. The shooting hasn't been there. +3 for Julian Strawther. And then Dario Saric has really struggled. I would have liked to seen him drop even more, but he did go -1 to a 74. Going over the Indiana Pacers. Big drop for Tyrese Halliburton, whose back has been bothering him. -3 to an 87 overall. Andrew Nembhard goes -2 to a 79 overall. Aaron Nesmith has been playing well this year. +1 to a 79. Jarris Walker gets a +1 to a 75 overall. And then Ben Shepherd gets a +3 to a 74 overall. Why they took off the Isaiah Jackson injury designation, I'm not sure. But he is out for the season. So, that's unfortunate. Going over to the New Orleans Pelicans, Zion gets a drop, -2 to an 87 overall, while Brandon Ingram gets the +2 to an 87 overall. Injuries have hit this team hard, as you can see here. We do get Jose Alvarado, +2 to a 78 overall. Jordan Hawkins has really emerged this season as a scorer, +4 for him to a 77 overall. Yves Missi gets a +3 to a 73 overall, while Daniel Tice drops -1 to a 73 overall. I think the experiment of having Tice in the lineup wasn't going to work. They gambled. David Griffin really couldn't get anything for Brandon Ingram that he wanted. And so I don't think a trade is going to materialize until closer to the deadline. Maybe we'll see if they really struggle, if they make a coaching change first, but we'll see. Jeremiah Robinson Earl goes +1 to a 73 overall. And then Brandon Boston has really emerged with injuries to other players. He gets a +3 bump to a 73 overall. Detroit Pistons, Cade Cunningham gets his bump, +1 to an 87 overall. Jaden Ivey gets a +2 to an 80 overall. Tobias Harris drops -1 to a 79. Tim Hardaway Jr. has played well as a starting small forward, +1 to a 77 overall. Simone Fontecchio gets a drop, -2 to a 74 overall, while Ron Holland gets a position change to power forward and goes a +1. We also get a position change for Isaiah Stewart, Hardaway, who I mentioned already. So those are the position changes for the Pistons. Going over to the Raptors, RJ Barrett gets a bump, +3 to an 84 overall. They love RJ Barrett on NBA 2K, or at NBA 2K. Grady Dick gets a big, massive jump, +6 to an 82 overall. Ochai Agbaji gets a bump to a 76 overall, +3, along with Davion Mitchell to a 76, +4. Chris Boucher gets a bump, +1 to a 75. Position change for Bruce Brown. And then Jonathan Mogbo gets a +4 to a 73 overall. He got hurt last night, but he'd been playing really well in minutes previous. Jamal Shed got a +1 to a 70, while also Jamison Battle gets a +2 to a 70 overall. He's really filled in nicely off the bench in the rotation. Houston Rockets time. Jalen Green gets a bump, +1 to an 85 overall. Fred VanVleet struggled with his shooting. He goes -2 to an 82. We get Tari Eason, +1 to an 80, while Cam Whitmore drops -2 to a 76 overall. San Antonio Spurs. It's a shame to hear about Greg Popovich. Hopefully he's okay and can get back on the sideline soon. Spurs ratings changes. Chris Paul goes +2 to an 83 overall. Harrison Barnes +2 to a 79 overall. Am I mistaken, or did he get badges added finally? I can't remember how many badges he had before because I'm not looking at it, but I'm thinking he got some badges added, and that's like 4 years overdue. We get Jeremy Sohan, who is now out with a broken thumb, I believe. Why he doesn't have an injury designation, I don't know. +1 to a 78 overall, while Zach Collins goes -1 to a 77. Malachi Branham goes +1 to a 76. And then Julian Champagnie goes +2 to a 75 overall. Really quickly, Stephon Castle gets a shift to point guard. Interesting because you can make a case that he's the 2. Branham kind of plays the 3, the 2, and the 1. And then Wesley's kind of a backup 1. So interesting there. Something to keep an eye on with the injuries to Vassell and Trey Jones. Phoenix Suns +1 for Kevin Durant. Nothing for Beal or Booker, but they do get position changes. They go up a position, shooting guard for Booker, small forward for Beal. Tyus Jones gets nothing. I can't believe it. He's been one of the really steady point guards this year. I thought he deserved to go at least +1 or +2. Grayson Allen does get a drop, -1 to a 77. He also changes positions to shooting guard. We get Royce O'Neal +2 to a 77 overall. We get Ryan Dunn +5 to a 75 overall. Well-deserved. He's played really, really well. Obviously, shooting the 3 surprisingly well considering he didn't shoot it often in college. Going over to the OKC Thunder. Chet Holmgren gets a bump +1 to an 88 overall. Lou Dort +1 to a 81 overall. Alex Caruso gets a -1, and he gets a position change to backup small forward. Aaron Wiggins moves to shooting guard, and he is +179 overall. Cason Wallace also moves to shooting guard and gets a +1 to 77 overall. Ousmane Dieng gets a bump +1 to a 74 overall. AJ Mitchell gets a bump +1 to a 69 overall and gets position change to point guard. And then Isaiah Hartenstein gets his inside defense bumped +20 from 63 to 83. So that's more like it. So hopefully he'll look like himself once he comes back out of injury designation in the game. Going over to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Anthony Edwards goes +1 to a 94 overall. Julius Randle +1 to an 86. Naz Reid gets a bump +2 to an 83 overall. Mike Conley, who's still working his way back from an injury-filled summer, goes -1 to an 80 overall. Dante DiVincenzo gets a position change to point guard, -1 to a 79 overall. And then Nickeil Alexander-Walker gets a bump +1 to a 78 overall. Going over the Portland Trailblazers, surprised that Anthony Simons didn't get a small bump. Who got a downgrade is Jeremy Grant, going -1 to an 81 overall. He moves to power forward. We have Denny Advia going -1 to a 79 overall. Tamani Kamara gets a little boost. He also gets changed to shooting guard. He gets a +2 to a 76 overall. Delano Banton gets a well-deserved +1 to a 76 overall. He's been killing it in the fourth quarter. Jonathan Clingan gets a +1 to a 74 overall. And then rounding it out is Ryan Rupert to a +2 to a 72 overall. Golden State Warriors, we got bumps for Buddy Hield. Gets a massive bump, +5 to an 84 overall. I was a little shocked to see this one, honestly. I'll be curious to see what the Real 2K Insider thinks about Hield going that high. Maybe it's justified. per his data metrics. Looking at Andrew Wiggins, +3 to an 81 overall. That's well-deserved because he's been playing phenomenal this year so far. We get Brandon Podziemski goes -1 to a 78 overall. Position change to backup point guard. Moses Moody, +1 to a 77. Position change to shooting guard. Trace Jackson Davis and Kevon Looney both go +1 to a 77 overall. Gary Payton II goes to a 76 overall +1. And then Lindy Waters gets a +1 to a 75 overall. Last but not least, the Washington Wizards. We get a bump for Jordan Poole, well-deserved, +5 to an 84 overall for him. Bilal Coulibaly gets a +4 jump to an 81 overall, well-deserved for him as well. Kyle Kuzma drops -2 to an 81 overall. Corey Kispert drops -1 to a 77 overall. Alex Sarr gets a bump +2 to a 77. Bub Carrington gets a +4 to a 74 overall. I thought he should be at least 75. Bagley should have dropped as well. He's not really played much. Same with Holmes. We do see a +3 for Kaishan George, who's been playing well lately since being in the rotation. And then last but not least for the Washington Wizards, a +1 bump for Johnny Davis to 71 overall. Now, let me jump over really quickly before we get out of here to the actual assistant coaches, and I'll let you know who's been kind of swapped in as far as positions. So now we have Darvin Ham as the lead assistant coach for the Milwaukee Bucks. Wes Unseld is the lead assistant for the Bulls. Added in the game, which previously was not in, Nate Reinking and Omar Cook are now added. We get, let's see, looking just really quickly to see. Igor Kokoskov gets moved to assistant coach for the Atlanta Hawks. Miami Heat, Chris Quinn gets moved to assistant coach. We get, I'm just looking, let's see. So we get Matt Hill for the Charlotte Hornets added in. We get Mike Williams added in for the Utah Jazz. Not quite sure why they left off Jason Terry off the coaching staff, since he's one of the front bench assistants for them, but that's okay. We have, let's see, just looking really quickly. Mo Cheeks gets moved to assistant coach for the New York Knicks. We get, let's see, we get Jeremiah Boswell added to the Orlando Magic. Randy Gregory as well to the Orlando Magic. Sean Sweeney gets added as lead assistant for the Dallas Mavericks. And just looking just to see if anybody else. Dan Jerriott gets added to the New Orleans Pelicans. Looks like no changes there. Will Dunn gets added to the Houston Rockets. The Spurs, they took out Darius Singila, but they did not add any coaches in. That's unfortunate because Mike Norries should have been added in, but that's okay. No changes, it looks like, for the Suns. Dave Bliss gets added as lead assistant for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Ronnie Burrell gets added into the coaching staff for the Portland Trailblazers. And that is it as far as the coaching staffs. So that's the update, folks. So Let me know in the comments who you think should have went up that did not, or who should have went down who did not. I'm not really interested in like ratings per se of like why is so and so not this rating. More so like who you think should have went up and down. As always, make sure you hit the like button on this video if you haven't already. Subscribe if you haven't already, and please share this video across social media. Share it with your friends, let them know. On the channel, I try to provide the most NBA 2K content that I can. Always looking to bring something new and exciting to the channel. So keep posted for more videos. Until then, take care.